Hello everybody, good morning, good afternoon or good night, depending on the time of the day that you're listening to this mini podcast. My name is Diana Valencia. I'll be hosting today a special delivery for the podcast Poslaverdad in Colombia from the small and ancient city of Exeter in the southwest of the United Kingdom. You can find me in Twitter at Diana Lowline Val with B, with all capital letters. And today we're starting a series of special deliveries from the town of Exeter. As I said, it's a very small town located in the southwest in the county of Devon in the United Kingdom. It has almost 130,000 inhabitants, which is comparable to Apartado, Antioquia. As you can see, it's quite small. But it hosts one of the most important universities of the United Kingdom, particularly for international students. So it has an important diversity of different cultures and knowledge and points of view around very relevant topics for everybody, but especially for us in Colombia. And our intention is to bring to you, the special audience of Poslaverdad in Colombia, a bit of this diversity and other understandings of our world and situations that can boost the debate and also probably give us new perspective around issues in our country. So be very welcome and thank you so much for listening. We start today with a very special interviewee. His name is Tor Duca. He's one of the researchers and students in the History and Philosophy department at the University of Exeter, and he's also part of the committee of the Socialist Society of the University of Exeter, and he organized the first huge event of the academic year for the society. This was a seminar around the topic of Marxism. So we got the opportunity to talk with Tor around Marxism, communism, socialism, what's happening with those in Latin America, in Colombia, with the guerrilla that claims to be Marxist and Leninist. So this is a very different and fresh point of view of Colombian and Latin American important topics, very relevant for us. So we covered these topics within 20 minutes. So it's very brief and understandable. And I hope that you find it interesting and that you be able to enjoy this interview as much as I did. Thank you so much.
La entrevista.
So thank you for accepting this interview. This is a pilot and we're talking to Colombia for the podcast Poslaverdad, which is a podcast made by and for young people in my country, basically. They cover many political and contemporary news and things happening in my country. But we have decided, taking a good advantage of the fact that I am here in Exeter, to get fresh views and interesting topics from this corner of the planet to South America. So here we are with Tor,
T-O-R.
Tor. Oh, okay, and your family name is?
Duca, D-U-C-A.
Oh, yeah, Tor Duca.
Yes.
Are you British?
Born and raised in Britain, but my parents are my mother is Danish and my father is Maltese. The second name comes from Sicily in Italy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay, yeah, good name. Well, tell us about yourself, first of all.
Okay. What exactly about myself? It's about like what I'm doing at university.
Your story, yeah. How you ended up here in Exeter? What you doing? Something probably about the society as well.
Right. Well, I guess, lived in England all my life, in London, the capital, with a child of two foreigners, which has, I think, affected a lot of my thinking and the way I see things quite a bit. I sort of developed my socialist mentality probably around the age of 16, 15, so around 4 or 5 years ago. And over a year ago now, when I was 17, I finished secondary school, and came to Exeter because it was one of the best universities for what I was to study, which is history and philosophy. The sort of base around that was, I thought they were the two most fundamental subjects within humanities. All humanities are based around the basic idea, the progression in history of ideas, and the progression and the articulation through philosophy. But I came here. One of the first things I did was try to become associated with the Socialist Society here, which is quite interesting because this is a very right-wing university. Actually, it's one of the most right-wing universities in the country. So it's quite a small society. It's quite a niche one. I became involved. Last year I was usually very active. I came every week to the meetings. This year I'm very involved in the committee. I'm the secretary. I do a lot of organisation, which I've organised this discussion group. I don't really know what else to say. I'm a very passionate socialist and a very passionate historian and philosopher.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about the history of the society?
Not very much. I've only been involved for the past year or so. I guess it's a relatively old political society, apparently, from what I've heard. The stories passed down from the previous committees. Relatively old, but never particularly big, because, as I said, not really popular around here. All I know really is the history of last year. And so the last year was a particularly small society, and it was very much a massive problem in socialist societies all over the country. Particularly this one, I think, is we have a very bad problem being quite homogenous. We have only, throughout our history, we've been overwhelmingly white European, and had a horrible gender imbalance as well. It's been overwhelmingly men. This year is one of the better ones. We have a lot more people involved, and we have a few more women involved, which is nice, and people of the LGBTQ community. But sadly, we're still lacking people of more ethnic minorities. But I guess that's just the sad reality of how they struggle to get into university in general, and because of the way the universities are run, they are often very afraid to be political as well, due to fear of repercussions.
Yes, of course. Is this the first meeting for this academic year?
This is the first meeting of this type. We've been doing meetings every week on Wednesdays since the beginning of the academic year, usually discussing academic topics and all sorts. The first meeting was just a basic introduction to socialism. We've had, what else? We had a very interesting discussion with a professor here about anarcho-syndicalism, and all sorts like that. But this is the first discussion group, which is something we've literally just started this year. It's something which I wanted to do last year, but now I'm part of the committee. I start pushing it through. And it's organising this idea of all of us, a big group of people, meeting rather informally, met at my house, and just discussing ideas in an informal but still academic-centred environment.
So it's the first seminar?
It's the first seminar, yeah. This is the first seminar.
Why, for the first seminar, you did Marxism?
It just seemed like a really good place to start, I'm not going to make it start off with socialism. That's a ludicrously broad topic which will get nowhere. But Marx is one of the first most seriously taken, the first seriously taken socialist, pretty much. There were obviously people before him, Feuerbach and the utopian socialists, and can make an argument there were smaller, less organised socialist movements in France and even in Latin America as well. But Marx is the first big, serious one, and he went on to inspire the big although I do condemn these regimes, the big statist Soviet regimes and communist China regimes, but also to a degree has inspired the smaller and much more humane anarchist movements, and also inspired the social democratic movements, say in Scandinavia and Germany, and also, to my knowledge, that in large part in Latin America, the social democrats have had a good bit of influence. So he's very foundational and very important, but at the same time he's very, very flawed. There are many, many issues. So it's not going to be us talking to each other about how he's so amazing. In fact, as you saw in his meeting, a lot of it was us ripping him to shreds. It was us saying how
critical thinking all over.
But we still understand he's very important. So that's why I think it's a good place to start with him. Good way to start with him.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to repeat the last question that one of the guys did. What was his deal?
What was his deal?
What was it all about? Yeah. What's the point?
The point.
Marxism?
Well, that's a really hard one, because I'm actually writing an essay on it currently. Because depending on how you interpret him or which works you read of him, you're not really sure if his point is he wanted better workers' rights, better workers' conditions, or if he was what he believed to be anyway, a scientist who believed that the synthesis of the classes was inevitable and was something that's coming. He was simply prophesizing, in a sense, these things rather than giving a moral prescription. So he did spend a lot of time agitating. He was definitely politically active. He did a lot of work organizing trade unions, and he communicated a lot with revolutionary groups all over the world, quite often in the native language because he was a polyglot. So I guess a Marxist deal was articulating the problems with capitalism, and then everything apart from that is only speculation, I think. That was the main thing, articulating the problems of capitalism, and the problems of socialism as well, actually, socialism at the time, utopian socialism. And then everything else, you could say it was to agitate to bring about the end of capitalism, or if it was simply to just accept that capitalism will end eventually, as some interpretations say. But yeah, his only definite deal is the problems of capitalism, I'd say.
Okay, so yeah, I heard some words in the seminar like satirical and rhetorical about his work. So
definitely, especially like the early works and the manifesto in particular. The manifesto was meant to be read by the average working man to create a class consciousness. It's not an academic work in the same way as, say, Das Kapital is or the German ideology. And that's why, say, in the German ideology and in Das Kapital, he often attacks people who take a moral perspective or use rhetoric, because that's where he's being an academic. But as I said, in Communist Manifesto, he's not being an academic in the Communist Manifesto, he's being an agitator. And that's when he is being satirical, when he's being rhetorical. Saying that, there are lots of moments in Das Kapital, his supposed academic work, where he's being quite rhetorical as well. He often uses terms like robbery and theft, and he describes the capitalist ability to change the morality of the time as a trick as well. But he's just generally a rather complicated author who changes his opinions from work to work. It's hard to think what he truly thought, but there's certainly a lot of rhetoric and satire in his work.
Is it or not the Marxism and communism the leftist point of the left wing?
What do you mean exactly?
Like in the political spectrum, where we have the right wing and the left wing, could we say that communism and Marxism is like the left of the left? Or is it
no,
not
necessarily. You could certainly be an orthodox Marxist and be considered what is today a centrist. An orthodox Marxism is the idea that communism or socialism will come around eventually. You don't really have to do anything about it. So, in theory, you could practice radical, really unethical capitalism and be a Marxist, and say that you're being this awful capitalist because you're trying to bring about the class consciousness and the change. And Marxism was certainly pivotal in influencing groups all over the spectrum. Some of my friends have stated how his critiques of capitalism and his works on economics have been used by right-wingers such as Margaret Thatcher, in a reverse sort of way. She sees the critique and sees how she can use that to her advantage in ruling. I can't remember the specifics of it, but as well, then you get to the more centre of it as well. So social democratic and social liberal parties as well, they're not radically left. Most of them are still capitalists, but they still see the critiques of Marx and try and alleviate that, or even see the prescriptions of Marx and try and practice that, as I said, with the whole orthodox Marxism thing. And then as well, the question is like, is there anyone more left than Marx? And you could certainly make the point that the anarchist movements are a bit more far left, given that they are far more concerned with equality. Marx actually did not consider himself an egalitarian. He believed that equality was the way of achieving freedom and emancipation, and the best way for individuals to realize themselves. But he was not an egalitarian because he thought that egalitarian himself was good, at least in theory.
Okay, well, thank you. Do you know something you mentioned about socialism and Marxism in Latin America? What you know about that?
I'm probably, maybe I'm more well versed than others, but I'm sadly more ignorant than I should be. But the whole history of socialism in Latin America is really, really complicated. Quite often one filled with a lot of hope, and one, but usually filled with a great deal of disappointment and despair. So, the rise of socialism in Chile, which had a lot of good points in it, in a way it produced in some ways better social welfare. It also was bad in a lot of other ways for sort of economic progress and inefficiency as well. But then it also eventually led to American imperialism, leading to the installation of Pinochet, probably one of the most vicious dictators in Latin American history, an awful man. And quite often there's been this whole thing in Latin America that you have a socialist regime and then a reactionary regime follows it. So my history of Brazil is a bit foggy, but that's essentially what happened. They had socialist regimes followed by very reactionary ones, followed by democratically elected socialist ones, and elected reactionary ones. And then of course, Cuba must be mentioned as one of the most effective socialist regimes in history, as well as probably one of the better places, one of the more egalitarian places in Latin America. It's a very flawed regime. I'm personally not a statist, but it can't be argued they have one of the highest standards of living in Latin America as a result of some of the programs they've put forward. Apart from that as well, there's also, it should be mentioned, the Mexican revolutions as well, where anarchism was a really big thing with Zapata and what's his name, Villas, I think, or something. Anyway, and then in modern times when the Zapatistas came along in Chiapas and established their own little commune. And that seems to have been going. The first Mexican Revolution sadly did not go anywhere particularly amazing. But this one, the revolution in Chiapas seems to be holding up and doing quite nicely on a small scale. So there's a lot of hope in Latin American socialism and in Latin America's future socialism, but there's a lot of despair. As well, actually, no one, it must be mentioned, is Venezuela, which, as a result of some of its very, very poor economic planning, is doing really badly currently, because although a lot of people debate if they're socialist or not, I'm a bit on the fence, but I'm probably more inclined to call them populist, with the way they gave lots of great things when they had the ability to. So they gave better healthcare, they were giving around food and things like that. They're doing lots of stuff. But because of the nature of them, because of the nature of their populism, they weren't making a long-term solution. They weren't developing their economy. They weren't distributing the means of production among the workers. And in the end, when the one thing they built their economy around, oil, fell in price, they are now in an absolute crisis, and they're pretty much just waiting for oil to go back up again, and then they can start saying they're doing okay again. But this is the problem with Latin America and socialism, really. It often goes hand in hand with populism, which is not sustainable.
Absolutely. In our case, in Colombia, we had a guerrilla for more than 60 years. FARC. They claim to be marxism-leninism guerrilla. What do you think about that?
I think it's a shame that because Latin America has a lot in common with the economy of Russia, especially at the time. It is still a mostly agricultural economy with a very underdeveloped industry, which is based often around the exploitation of more powerful economies surrounding it. So in the same way in Tsarist Russia, it was important they could export their grain to the European nations. It was what their economy was built around. And it's the same way in most Latin American countries, which are many of them are banana republics. They're exporting coffee and fruit and things like that. And they haven't really progressed an economy. They haven't built an economy yet which can go to industrialization overnight, like the Marxist-Leninists want. If the Latin Americans want socialism and need socialism, the solution is not a brutal dictatorship that will force industrialization upon them overnight at the expense of the people. The solution, I would say, is either they build the socialism around how they are currently, so they develop agrarian socialism, which is a totally feasible and understandable way of living, or they find softer forms of capitalism, maybe go through the orthodox Marxist route, and they'd work harder to elect just and non-corrupt, because corruption is a serious issue in Latin America, regardless of the side you're on. If it's capitalist or socialist, it's a really big problem.
Definitely the cancer of Latin America.
Oh, yeah, the cancer of the entire third world, and even the first world to a lesser degree. But, if they want to industrialize, it will have to be it would have to be through very organic means, otherwise it's going to hurt. They could industrialize through these Marxist-Leninist groups like FARC, as FARC wants to do, but we've seen what it's done. It's been millions dead, it's been brutality, and I don't think that was worth it. It's better to do it through legitimate means. I mean, you could also have maybe the anarchist way of industrialization, or one of the anarchist theories of market socialism, where again you can industrialize organically, but still have the means of production owned by the worker as well. There are so many solutions which are much more appropriate for Latin America and the way their economy is than Marxist-Leninism. Sadly, the Soviet Marxist-Leninism dominates socialist culture all over the world. It's a real shame. But I think the only future for socialism in Latin America is really, I'm giving all these ideas of other people, but really any kind of future socialism is one they'll have to define and create for themselves rather than looking to another country, actually, I think.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Tab.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on your first seminar.
Thank you.
Socialist Society. No, thank you.
La entrevista.